Hi, my name's Tom Ott, and I'm the project manager from our central Microsoft team here at Atea Global Services. And today I have the pleasure of sitting with Matous, our Azure MVP. How you doing?
Hi, it's good to be here.
Good to see you. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just Azure and cloud in general. Being the Azure MVP, obviously you have deep technical experience with it as well, and we're also at our boot camp back in January. And my kind of primary interest right now lies in how you actually see how the Azure space or cloud space has changed in business over the last couple of years.
So Azure changed a lot. I always say that you got cloud years, and cloud years goes most fast out of all the other years. You got like human years and dog years, and you maybe have the cloud years after that. It's just like those are the fastest one.
Right.
So whenever I say like long time ago in cloud, it means completely different than like long time ago in cloud. It might be 6 months really.
Yeah, yeah.
So and I worked with Azure since like 2010. That was the first time I saw it, and the first time that Microsoft introduced that, and it looked a lot different. Could mention the Silverlight portal that was pretty ugly, and there was like 6 features in Azure at that time. But Microsoft basically said that Azure is going to be purely about platform as a service. There was no infrastructure, no VMs, no operating systems, nothing of a kind. It was called Windows Azure at that time. So it was kind of typical like the Microsoft at that time. It was like purely focused on that one ecosystem and nothing else. And Microsoft said these 5 services or 6 services, this is how everybody's going to develop apps in the future. There's not going to be no operating system. There's going to be no dependencies on the VMs and fiddling around the network and the storages and stuff like that. And they weren't wrong. That was okay. That was okay statement. But that was missing the transition period. So people asked at that time when everybody had Windows XP on their desktop, and there was still no way from that. And people ask like, so I have my line of business application supported by thick clients. How do I move away from that? How do I move to that new model that you mentioned, to the cloud and everything? And they said like, you don't. You rewrite it. That was a wrong answer. It was like the same answer as Microsoft had with like from XP to Vista and from Windows Mobile to Windows Phone, right? There was just like no transition period. Just rewrite it, start over. So that's basically what kind of blocked the cloud in the early years, and that's what customers considered as like not ready for production yet. And suddenly, like others started to come up with infrastructure as a service, like and Microsoft was pretty much pushed to the infrastructure as a service by the demand. I remember testing like a few customers in the private preview of infrastructure as a service, and comparing that to like a hardcore virtualization and hardware guy. That infrastructure couldn't do much, right? You couldn't map to multiple disks. You didn't have possibility to work with network that much. So traditional IT folks, they felt kind of blocked by that.
Right.
And the management wasn't really ready for like massive scale. You still did the management in the old way. So if you had more VMs in the cloud, then it's harder to be really cumbersome. And that's how cloud slowly evolved. And basically, like right now, it's not problem to maintain thousands of VMs or other resources. And instead of treating them like the old infrastructure, instead of like treating them like pets, meaning give the servers funny names and patch them up and cry when they die, we treat them more like cattle, right? The 1,000 comes and 1,000 goes, and nobody cares, and everything is highly automated. But it was a long way to get there. And eventually we start to see what Microsoft said in the beginning. This is the future. This is how everybody's going to make apps in the cloud. You don't need VMs. You don't need any operating system management. And we're moving over to containers, where it's like less OS footprint. And we're moving over to cloud native things and microservices and multi-tenant applications. So that was pretty much the development that was there and wasn't always easy. But we moved there from first hybrid cloud, then some fully custom cloud solutions, and we are moving forward to more software as a service based solutions and hosted purely from public cloud environment.
Yeah, it's been a long road since the beginning, and even now with all the developments over the last couple of years, we still see a lot of businesses hanging on to that sort of hybrid cloud fundamental, as
Yeah.
we still have a lot of sort of resistance going up into pure cloud solutions. No, but what's your take on that?
Well, the hybrid, people use different words for hybrid cloud, and it basically, like, hybrid cloud stayed as a buzzword, but it means something completely else than it meant back then, back in old times. Like when I mentioned how hybrid cloud in 2012, people had a completely different perception that they have today, and it evolved. What the problem is that some people who still mentioning the hybrid cloud, they kind of still cling to that old world, right? Basically, like in 2012, the hybrid cloud meant that you have the VMs in the cloud and you manage them with the same tools. You maybe treat the VM in the same way as you treat your on-premise VM, and that was maybe okay in 2012, but certainly it's not okay now. So basically, like today, if you treat your VMs in the cloud the same way as you treated them on-premise, that's not gonna be beneficial for you. That it's gonna end up as a more expensive or equally expensive as you had it on premises, and you will not see any cloud benefit whatsoever. Basically, the cloud benefit is what I mentioned earlier. It's like basically like to do the full automation and do the operations by thousands and don't that much care about like individual resources, but more take care about the context of the application and scalability that happens underneath it. So hybrid today I see as not managing VMs, but I see hybrid as managing edge devices, and they still gonna be there, right? We can't have possibly everything in the public cloud. There's still gonna be the devices on the edge, meaning collecting data from the sensors, collecting any telemetry that we can gather from these places. There's going to be data that needs to be offline for some time, like on the vessels or on the planes, and places that are not easily accessible, in construction zones and stuff like that. But at some point, these edge devices on these hardly accessible places is going to collect enough of data, then we got to evaluate them and work on top of that, and that's going to happen in the public cloud. So that's how I see the hybrid cloud today, but not as an excuse why not to go fully cloud.
Right. Okay. Well, it's a good thing to sort of break the stigma, because I mean, obviously, also in our day-to-day sort of operations, we still feel that kind of resistance, right, with the old school of thinking. But transitioning from hybrid cloud, you know, in this day and age, with all these other also public cloud providers, if we talk about AWS or Google Cloud now, one of the buzzwords keeps on coming up: multi-cloud.
Yeah.
We hear it and see it popping up everywhere. Where do you think, you know, that's going to go, or how viable it actually is for a business to move into?
So with AWS and Google and basically like and Microsoft as like the big three, people always mention it, right? We're gonna pick two or all three. They usually started with one, and then it differs by the market, because people in Europe mainly started on Microsoft and people in States mainly started on AWS. AWS was the first one who actually offered infrastructure as a service, right? So that's there's a lot of reasons behind that. The difference how people choose these clouds, that differs a lot actually. Like when you, for example, go and browse through different forums and through Stack Overflow and these kind of pages helping developers, you see a lot more questions coming up, for example, for AWS than Azure, but there are different questions. People who choose AWS and people who choose the Microsoft are usually not the same guys, because AWS is easier for people who come from like individual businesses, doing individual projects, and smaller companies. That's easily accessible for them. And Microsoft started on what Microsoft was always good at, like business-to-business relationship, relationship to other companies, and the relationship to large enterprises. Those were the first customers of Azure.
Right.
And each one of these is moving the other direction as well, right? It's not like that today is AWS is only for small guys and Microsoft is only for big guys, right? So that's what kind of started to create that multi-cloud sort of conversation. Like these guys have roughly the same services. How do I pick one another, or do I pick more of them just to like load balance things, just to not be dependent on one single vendor? What what if one goes down, right? How do I kind of maintain okay relationship with both of them, make sure that I can move my solution around. Most of people talk about moving their solution around multiple different clouds. Those are usually the people who never try that, because if you really want to move your virtual machines or the other parts of infrastructure around, you're not just moving the VM, you move the dependencies as well. And in the VM world, it's easier. In the container world, it's easy. It's maybe easier than the VMs, but further you move on the cloud stack, basically, and you picking up the cloud native technologies, and you go more over to like platform services, or you go more over to the serverless. It's harder and harder to move it, really, because it's tailored up for needs for specific cloud, really. It's tailored up for like management tools for specific cloud. So in theory, you can move that. Same as in theory, you can change your place, you can change your apartment every month, but it's a not comfortable thing to do. So yes, you can move. You can just like tell the guy who rents your apartment, I'm moving out. But then you have to put everything in those boxes and think about like what you're gonna need in the new place first, and like you have to consider the dependencies, right?
Oh yeah.
And then you move. So with clouds, it's exactly the same. So what I see with my customers is like they start to talk about the multi-cloud, and the first one started a long time ago, but they don't pick different clouds because they would like to move stuff around. That's uncomfortable. But they pick different clouds because each one of them has that one special thing where they're really good at. And that's what differentiates them from the other clouds. So I believe that multi-cloud future is there, definitely, but it's not gonna be because you like to move stuff. It's gotta be there because you pick a strategic difference from one cloud or another and use that one in collaboration with the other clouds who are good at other things.
So essentially just finding the benefits sort of that you can get out of each individual one to sort of fit your needs in the best possible way. But still, I mean, even in the day and age where hybrid cloud is becoming more and more of a thing now, we still see, at least in our sort of world and our ecosystem, a lot more businesses, moving into Azure, moving the Microsoft way directly. What do you think, or what do you think rather, sets Microsoft so far apart from maybe others in that sense, with Azure in particular?
Yeah, so it goes like into traditional relationships, right? Like I said that Microsoft was always like the business to business, while the others not so much. Like Google, for example, is typical consumer company. Amazon is typical consumer company, right? They both had the different areas, but it's still very consumer companies. So suddenly, when you try to build a public cloud, first it starts on the business to business relationships. And it's kind of hard to talk to the other company who you never had business before with, because you didn't offer enterprise solution. It's kind of hard to convince them, hey, come work with us. From Microsoft perspective, from historical consequences, it's quite easy because they used to sell them software products. They used to sell them Windows Server. They used to sell them SQL Server. Right. They had this sales structure around that, how to talk to business customers, how to talk to other enterprises, and what kind of solution to offer them. Same goes with supporting that solution, right? So I'm not saying it's not impossible for the other guys, for Amazon and Google, but it's certainly harder. Another thing is, like, when you, for example, consider that hybrid cloud in the beginnings, the hybrid cloud was about using the same tools.
Right.
So you get to use the same tools as you have trained people for. You still get to use the Windows Server. You still get to use the SQL Server. If you use SQL databases in Azure, you can use the same management studio for that. However, Amazon didn't build any database engine. They didn't build their own operating system. They had some tools how to manage the infrastructure because they did it for themselves, but they had to transform that to the public cloud world, right? So that's what created the hybrid from the start, and that was easier for other customers to move from that hybrid to like full cloud native, because the learning curve was much easier on the Microsoft side, coming from traditional software house rather than consumer-facing company.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So another reason is that if you are a company who's dealing primarily with consumers and you try to get other customers into your public cloud environment, they might not be necessarily so excited out of that idea. So if you as another company who has a primarily consumer-facing business is suddenly approached by another consumer-facing company to offer you hosting things from their cloud, the question is if you're going to like that. Essentially, you are competitors in some way. If not directly, then you still might get, especially in Google case, you might get analyzed from your behavior and relationship with other consumer businesses, and how's that gonna affect your retail business, right? These are other companies who work with retail exactly the same way as you are. These are other companies who basically have a similar business model. Maybe your data are more valuable than exposing it to another guys, right? However, Microsoft basically openly says, like, we don't do consumer-related business, except for selling client operating systems. We don't do that, and even the client operating systems are still sold to like big hardware manufacturers, right? So Microsoft essentially is like the business-to-business relationship. Therefore, retail customers and consumer-facing customers don't have to be, they don't have to feel like afraid or potentially exposed to another similar thinking company.
No, so it's obviously a very large organization that's been around for a very long time, and I guess the overall sort of view is that people still have a lot more trust in a company like Microsoft and in some of the younger guys that are starting up, even though Amazon and Google obviously have also been around for their share of time at this point. But it's interesting. But still, now you still have some sort of legacy customers that are still running full on-prem. That are just, I don't know if you want to call it stuck in the past, or that are just very reluctant to take that next step, that almost hone their data centers or their on-prem environments like a little pet that they don't want to let go of.
Right.
But how would you describe essentially why a move to the cloud would be so much more beneficial for clients such as those that are absolutely stuck in that center of legacy, so to say?
So cloud benefits, those were discussed many times, right? Basically, like, people choose different reasons for migration. Some people choose time to market because it takes significantly less time to actually deploy something in the public cloud, whatever it is, right? You don't need to prepare infrastructure. You don't need to prepare anything for that. You don't need to like deal with wires and all that stuff. You don't need to buy licenses up front from someone and calculate how much you're going to need that. Same goes with hardware capacity, so time to market is there. The capacity planning, in general, it might be a good thing if you have predictable environment, but what if you have something unpredictable, right? So like you get a spike, and what do you do then? So these are like the very traditional reasons that been there already in the 2010, right? But more and more customers, and that's one is interesting, are choosing cloud because of security and compliance. And if you take a step back and if you actually look back, what was the number one reason why customers didn't migrate their things in 2010,
Security,
2012?
right?
It was security concerns, right? Somebody else is gonna touch my infrastructure. I don't feel secure about that. And that wasn't that much of a security concern as it was more of a trust issue. So those trust issues, they were moved. Because like security evolved, but it never was bad in the public cloud environment. You never heard of a public cloud security breach. You never heard of employee going over basically some customer's data when they weren't authorized to do so, right? So basically, it's just evolvement of trust. And today with different compliance. Just like different compliance methodologies in different sectors, can be healthcare, can be banking, can be different state legislation, but it can be GDPR in general as well. It's kind of hard for small guys, for small hosters and small individual companies to comply with everything, because not just you need legal experts, you need technical experts to implement that. While the other big guys like Microsoft and other cloud providers, they have to be compliant themselves because of their business-to-business relationship, right? So the exercise that they do on themselves, they can easily expose to others. So we done the exercise, we manage it, and we made it available for everybody else on the same principles as we do. That means in a very scalable way, because in the big scale, there's no room for small and individual pieces. So you can benefit from large-scale compliance scans and very automated environment. So if you are in the public cloud and somebody asks you like, are you GDPR compliant? Show me your personal data that you store in your databases. In Azure, it's quite easy thing to do. In a private environment, on the other hand, you need to do the work yourself.
Oh yeah.
So compliance is becoming the one of the major reasons why I see customers moving, or even the stubborn ones, even the stuck ones.
Yeah. No, they're eventually, I suppose, being forced in a sense, just by the changing environments to go up finally. And
of course, because like when you take a look at it, basically like when you take a look on the first like airline companies, on first banks, right? And back in old days, the first airline company who offered you like, hey, you can buy your ticket online. That was a very innovative companies like in the 90s, right, or something like that. Or the first bank who offered you like, hey, you can manage your account from your computer. You don't have to go to the bank. Those were very innovative companies. But then the timeline kind of went down and time flew, and suddenly all the other companies started to do that, and that's where you lose competitive benefit, right? And from competitive benefit, you go to the commodity world. Suddenly, that things becomes a commodity. So today, cloud is there. In the beginning, in 2010, 2012, maybe, you still had competitive benefit of going to the cloud world. Today is a commodity. Everyone expects you to do that.
Right.
So if your time to market with your product is anything else than couple days, and if you don't have agile development, and if you say like, yeah, we do release once per year and we maintain our own old infrastructure, you're really risking losing customers who go to the other guys that say like, yeah, we have a software as a service product. You don't have to patch anything. We take care of it.
No, ever-changing environment, and I think it's just going to accelerate more and more as time goes on, to be honest. Who knows what other trends are going to come up in the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, especially, if we talk about Azure, it's such a broad spectrum that keeps on growing exponentially. But also in that sort of ever-changing environment, and now that I think more than ever before, cloud technology is accelerating very, very rapidly, right? I mean, in IT in general, we talk about that every 18 months, everything is outdated in one sense, but it seems to be picking up more and more, which is also why sort of competency and spreading competency throughout your sort of organization about it is a critical and important thing. So, where do you see sort of other cloud providers even, for example, or other solution providers, and how they would benefit from probably applying some sort of educational foundation and really educating their staff on primarily cloud technologies to make sure they have everything covered? Because it's not just that we have specific cloud architects or experts in certain fields. It's becoming more and more that, for example, even us as a solution provider or as a service provider have to look at cloud more in a sense of how traditional IT used to be, where we need to figure out how to support it, how to operate it, how to create packages for it, applications, how to essentially translate the old legacy IT industry into the new sort of cloud spectrum. So yeah, what do you think about that? What's your take on that?
So that's the specific reason why we created the Atea cloud track, right? So that basically goes through different stages of how customers adopt cloud and helps them on every single step. And the primary reason why to have such a thing was that people from traditional solution providers, they always go to our customers and say, hey, Mr. Customer, I do these things, cool things in the IT. What would you like to do with us? And the customer goes like, yeah, like tell me what you can do. And the provider goes like, yeah, I can do anything. Just ask. And it goes like in the circle like that because like, so the idea of the Atea cloud track is to provide a catalog of services that we can do, but not necessarily be limited to those services there. So from that time that I spent in the public cloud environment, I noticed that customers adopt cloud technologies in the different stages, and they learn differently at the different stages as they go forward to the public cloud. And that's the main essence of that framework of that cloud track that we developed. So on each one of these steps, on each one of these levels of maturity, we get learning tracks for them that are very hands-on, and they help them to move forward and get the new knowledge in order to move forward. And it's all about the learning curve, and it's all about the hands-on experience, because it's 2019, you heard about the cloud from all over the place, but the very difference for especially those stubborn ones that you mentioned, that they never had a hands-on experience with it. They got all the marketing materials, they've seen countless of presentations, but they never touched it. So that's the main difference. We try them to feel it. We try them basically to transform the knowledge and transfer our knowledge.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much for coming down here and spending some time with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you very much for watching.